Good afternoon, and welcome to the WSCAH Westside Campaigning Against Hunger Town Hall. My name is Greg Silverman. I'm the CEO of the Westside Campaigning Against Hunger, and we're just thankful for folks who are joining us today, either live on this town hall, or we'll be watching the recording that will be sent out across our network. For those of you who are new to the Westside Campaigning Against Hunger, right, we're a 46-year-old anti-hunger organization based in New York City with original location on the Upper West Side and our warehouse distribution hub based in Washington Heights. We serve about 110,000 New Yorkers in need, about 6 million pounds of food, over half is fresh produce. Every customer gets access to benefits enrollment support. And we partner with many other amazing frontline organizations in an entity called the Roundtable, which is our collective of organizations like New York Common Pantry and Project Hospitality and Met Council and others to share data, to drive down prices, to advocate together for the front line, and to just give mutual support, because on the front line, it's difficult work, and we know that we can't do anything alone. We can do much better together. And right, it's 2025. It's been a lot already this year, starting in January, for many people, as I meet with my team and hear about what's going on in their personal and professional lives. And I'm sure you all have examples of your own of how this year has been for some traumatic and difficult in many ways. But when we think about hunger and we think about food security and the food system, we wanted to pull together some deep thinkers on this for our town hall today, and really dive into like what's happening right now and what's to come, the good, the bad, the ugly, and where we can make hopefully some strong progress in the now and in the future for all the communities we serve. So we're going to start letting in the three participants, and I'm just going to do a little introduction of all three that we're super excited to have here, and we'll go from there. So first we have Senator Michelle Hinchey, who is a New York State Senator elected in 2020 and represents the 41st Senate District. So Columbia, Greene counties, North Dutchess, portions of Ulster County. She's a graduate of Cornell and the ILR, as those of us who lived in Ithaca for a long time, or the Industrial Labor Relations School. And she, as I read in her larger bio, she credits her love of public service and community-based activism to her father, the late Congressman Maurice Hinchey, who I was truthfully fortunate to have as my Congress member when I had my restaurants for many years up in Ithaca, New York. So super excited to have her here. And what's really exciting for anyone in the anti-hunger world, Senator Hinchey serves as the chair of the Senate Ag and Food Committees and really has paved the way for a lot of climate-related efforts across New York State and to make a more stable food supply. And of most recent note, she was the Senate sponsor, the prime sponsor of the Universal School Meals Act, which I might be biased to say, as all my years of school food-based work, could be the biggest win for the anti-hunger efforts in any of the budgets, whether New York City, state, or federal. So super thankful, Senator Hinchey, to have you here. We also are joined by New York City Councilmember Shaun Abreu, who represents Manhattan's 7th District, which takes us all the way from the Upper West Side, Morningside Heights, West Harlem, Manhattan Valley, Hamilton Heights, and Washington Heights. Born and raised, Shaun is in northern Manhattan, went to George Washington High, up at the northernmost point of the island, and did his law degree at Tulane and worked a lot with the New York Legal Assistance Group. And he's been fighting to build a much stronger community in his district, and that he's always called home. Huge advocate for housing and worker rights and access to after-school programs. And with the Westside Campaign Against Hunger, his team runs a food distribution with us. So he's one of our core community partner sites where we distribute amazing healthy food to constituents in his district in Hamilton Heights, where I used to call home. So I'm super thankful to have Shaun here as well. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Kate MacKenzie, the Executive Director of the New York City Mayor's Office of Food Policy. Kate leads all the many issues on food policy and the city's food system, from evolving our long-standing emergency feeding system and prioritizing food insecurity and benefits access to thinking about wellness and through food education in all the schools. There's been huge efforts in this area. Uh, we've seen massive pushes, not just in like operations and programs, but like systems transformation when it comes to everything food under Kate. We're super thankful as she's pushed the 10-year food plan. That's, many of us were part of many discussions for over the years. And she's been the chief architect of the city's food education roadmap. And so it has led this effort to adopt plant-powered Fridays in the school meals program. Uh, right, my daughter is a proud New York public school eater of lunch every day. It's been the greatest thing in the world for me as a chef that my daughter loves school lunch. So thanks for all the work, Kate. And I know you as well are a proud mom of two kids who are eating school lunch every day. So we're super thankful to have you all here. So I appreciate you coming and on a Thursday amidst all the chaos of what's happening in our world. So welcome to our town hall and to the WSCAH community. I want to start with just like, a basic, I don't want to call it maybe it's a softball question, but I'm going to start with Kate on, food. How'd you get here? How'd you get to thinking about the importance of food policy? How did that become important to you? Like food and food policy, because I think it's important to understand like the power of all this work and where it comes from.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's great to be here. Great to be certainly with you, Senator and Councilmember, and all of you for joining again in the middle of the day. So I think subconsciously, I first got interested in food policy as a little girl in the lunch line. And standing in one line while my friends were in another line. And when I realized that the line that my friends were in was for free school lunch and my ticket was for paid school lunch, I got excited because I had a dad who loved saving money. And I said, Dad, like if I have this different colored ticket, I can get free school lunch. And we made just over the amount of money that where we didn't qualify for reduced or free meals. But that I think was the subconscious introduction to food policy. And then as I got involved in my college courses, I think really recognizing that all the education in the world about learning what to eat or how to prepare something frankly didn't matter if people didn't have the money or the access, the physical access to food. That to me seemed like a big opportunity to work on large scale change. And again, I think that the opportunity to really my patience is for impacting change for a lot of people, not one life at a time. So this just seemed like such a great opportunity for me to be able to marry those personal interests and with my professional interests.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we're ever thankful. I'm thankful to get to work with you for many years. And Senator Hinchey, we've worked indirectly because we're also thankful for all this universal schools work that you have championed in a way that, I remember 10 years ago working in Washington at Share Our Strength as we thought nationally about these things like universal school meals and how are we going to help, and then to see it actually come to fruition is incredible. So where did this start for you? How did you get into food and food system thinking, from whether it's ag or school meals? Like where's your origin on this?
Yeah, thank you. And first and foremost, thank you for having this forum and inviting us to be here. It's really wonderful to be a part of it. And thank you everyone for tuning in, whether now or later, because this is a really important discussion and one that's been important for decades, but arguably has never been more important than it is right now. I think, for me, I represent the 41st district. So that covers, as I said, Greene and Columbia counties, part of Dutchess, part of Ulster. It's a rural part of the world. It's a rural part of our state. And so I was really fortunate to grow up around farms and farm stands. And so I remember some of my early childhood memories really having the privilege and the luxury of being able to go to a local farm stand and eat the raspberries that we were buying that had been picked from that farm, right? And so being able to taste real food really early Started my love of food. Generally, I love food. I love to eat. It's like my hobby. So that's kind of a general interest. But really, when I ran for office back in 2020 and won the race, I was kind of looking holistically around what opportunities were both for committee memberships and what we could do and how to better connect upstate and downstate. I lived downstate for 10 years after college. I'm born and raised in Mid-Hudson Valley, and there's so much potential and more potential than we're even, totally leaning into for us to work together. We're much better when we look at our strengths. And the Ag Committee actually had an open chairmanship. And so I requested to the leader to chair the Agriculture Committee because I thought it was incredibly important both to elevate the industry and the trade, but to also better connect the dots for folks on what we're talking about when we're talking about agriculture. It's our local food supply. And if we don't have a local food supply, we're not being successful. And so we have to make sure that our farms are staying in business, but we have to make sure too that that good locally sourced fresh food is getting to the communities that need it. And so if we can expand those markets, strengthen those connections, and actually support our communities, we'll be a much stronger state. And the second part of that too is the climate crisis is real, right? We all know that. And when you look at the impacts that the climate crisis is having right now in our state, in our country, around the globe, it's really impacting agriculture. And I'll talk nationally, the states that grow a lot of our food. So when you look at California, Florida, the Midwest, you see those states underwater, on fire, and facing severe droughts. And so a lot of that is impacting, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more of this later, but that's impacting our food supply chains and the cost of food and how we get food. And if we're not focusing on New York farms where we have high elevation, we have access to water, and a lot of our farms are smaller, mid-sized farms, not like the big Netflix documentary farms, but the small and mid-sized farms that are doing the good practices that we've got in regulations through legislation and that are just good practices. If we're not supporting them and helping strengthen those ties that we've talked about, then we're going to be in a national security crisis because we'll only be importing the food internationally that we need. And so also an economic crisis when it's $6 billion of our state's economy. And so there's a lot of incredible work to be done to make sure that we have a solid, stable food system here in New York. And we've done a lot of work on that over the last 5 years. This is my 5th year chairing the committee. So 4.5 years that we've chaired the committee, including changing the name from agriculture to agriculture and food to better connect those dots. And so, it's been a really exciting time to be able to strengthen the connections between the whole state and make sure through initiatives too, like the universal school meals, that everyone, regardless of status, regardless of economic status, income, where you live, you get access to good food from New York.
Yeah, that's totally agree. That's amazing. And just pulling Shaun into the conversation, Councilmember Abreu. So born and raised, or raised in the Heights, I think you're born and raised in the Heights. And I'm sitting here on 180th in our new warehouse in the middle of the Heights. We're super proud of that. And you've been here a bunch of times and we do so much work together. What first made, obviously you're the only council member. We have lots of great council members, nothing against anyone else, but like you're the one council member that does direct distribution with the West Side Campaign Against Hunger. Like you've made this a priority. Where's that come from for you?
I'll tell you what made it a priority, but first of all, I want to thank you, Greg, and the panelists for having me today. Growing up, food access didn't always mean healthy access, right? There were plenty of delis, bodegas, and fast food spots, but not a lot of affordable fresh food options. Grocery stores existed, but produce was expensive, and for a lot of families, it was cheaper to buy processed or packaged foods. As a kid, you don't even think about it. You just want candy, you want the Doritos, you want the flaming hot Cheetos, you want the Slim Jims. That's what's around, that's what's easy. But what we did with WSCAH was something completely different. We provided fresh foods right out of our office, providing thousands upon thousands of produce and really healthy, nutritious options for our families. And it was the complete opposite of my upbringing. And so that's why partnering with WSCAH has made a big difference. We want people to eat better. We want them to know that they have healthy food options, but it's important to scale. And it's also important to making sure that we have that infrastructure, because your environment really is almost entirely determinative here when it comes to what you can actually eat. And with WSCAH, that partnership, we're changing around what's actually available at the local level. And that's why we need to keep doubling down on WSCAH. We need to keep doubling down on these partnerships, expanding our local community hubs like WSCAH has done, working with our churches, our nonprofits, our elected officials' offices. Your new headquarters uptown is going to be a big part of that. But let's double down. That's the way that I see it. And
I'll have that budget conversation separately.
so yeah, that's my answer to that, is the availability of it's what's around you, and we are changing that availability of good options with WSCAH.
That's great. Listen to all three of you. There was a couple words that popped into my head, right? We were talking about decreasing stigma and increasing access, whether it's access to markets for individuals or access to markets for individual farmers or entire economies. The stigma side, like we all know these stories of like the lunch line and who, whether it's the colored ticket or the lunch platter or however it was organized, and actually the absolute inefficiency of those models, right? When you do that. And we see the same in the emergency feeding world, right? Like where some places are getting great fresh produce and some places are having sugar sweetened beverages, and so as we think about increasing access, decreasing stigma, I'm gonna go last to Senator Hinchey, because I'm asking, like, what do you feel are like the big wins you've had? Because I know that, I want to get into universal school meals, but like Kate, like at the mayor's office, what do you feel have been the big, what are you holding your hat on right now of like in these crazy times of the big wins so far that you're feeling good about?
I'm not going to be glib and say like we've been here, because we have never been in a place like we're experiencing right now with our federal government acting in the way it is. But what I will say is that we've been able to transform big systems, and we've been able to, in a dime, turn over specifically the COVID food response in a way that really respected people, right? And made space for cultural appropriateness, and made space for having to do home delivered meals. So whether it is the through line for me and some of the work that I've been able to achieve with great partners like you and my fellow colleagues here, is thinking about choice, thinking about empowering people to have the opportunity of choice to make some of the changes in their life. And so whether that is looking at where you're sitting right now, transforming the emergency food program to, I don't know, be able to offer fresh produce when as a city, we never made that available until 3 years ago. And actually enabling you to order what you want, when you needed it delivered, understanding the fact that we certainly, and thank God, we're not the only source of food for you, but you should manage what you need and when you need that. And we're not done. We're not at all done in transforming emergency food in this city, but also then in the school food system. And yes, my kids give me the reviews every night. Some are better than others, but like that's part of this evolution of not just saying like we're going to cook our meals differently, but investing in the culinary training, not just of our extraordinary school food staff, but also on the island of Rikers, and being able to make sure that those staff are also learning the skills and the why we're asking them to cook food differently. Because I know that it's really hard to be said to, like, hey, just do this because that's the policy directive, that's the change. But really, when you engage people in feedback mechanisms and explaining like the ultimate goal and why we're having to do these things, you get so much more partnership. And so, the food education roadmap is an example there too, of we aren't just putting new and different food items on the trays in our schools, but we're engaging with the teachers through hundreds and hundreds of hours of professional development that they opt into to learn to teach about food and nutrition in different ways. And for kids to have age appropriate standards of what, my fifth grader should be learning versus my seventh grader. So those are the kinds of things that I think are important, that empower people with the information to begin to make better choices. And I'm not saying that that's the better choice. People themselves are choosing what to do with their life. So those are some of the things that I think are particularly exciting. And I have to put a plug in here also for what we've been able to do, in the evolution of programs. First, it was Get Food, then it became Groceries to Go. And this is a program that still exists, still needs a lot of advocacy to be able to make this a baseline program for people to be able to order food that they choose from neighborhood grocers in their area and have it delivered to them. This is unheard of, right? And especially in these times that we're living in, when people are afraid. People don't want to stand in a line, not because they don't have the time, which they don't, but also because they don't want to have a target on their back. And so to be able to do these things that enables people to order food from their house. I love the work that Westside Campaign is doing about home delivered meals and really making sure that we are understanding the environment, the experience that people have when they eat food. And that's what I love about what we've been able to do, and where, again, we've have great relationships with partners and receivers of food, consumers of food, organizations, to be able to think about what's in front of us and organize to make sure that we can make sure that our neighbors continue to be fed well.
Yeah, for sure. It's been amazing. And I used to do, I think you know this, I did some work when I worked in London on school food in prisons. And it was like such a meaningful, it was like, you start realizing all these massive distribution patterns of food, and like, how are you going to educate kids with unhealthy food? How are you going to help people get back on their feet in prison without healthy food? Like, this food is important. It might just be as a chef, right? It's not just as a chef restaurateur. It's like, food is important to people. People want to sit around the table. I don't care where you are. I was out on a meal delivery with City Meals, right, recently. It was like, how are we going to make sure people are getting the right food when they're getting, if you're a 90-year-old person on your own who came from another culture, and it's like all these things, it's increasing access to good food and nutrition and decreasing stigma at the same time. When we talk about all that, I want to get right away to this universal school meals piece, Senator Hinchey, because I think some people like listening who maybe don't fully understand it. So if you want to take 2 minutes to like explain the importance of it and the value of it, would be really, because it's like, I'm not being glib about it, like, yeah, I don't believe there's anything bigger or better that we can hang our hats on as a state right now in terms of food than that.
Totally, and I think it is the shining light in the budget that we just passed, and it has been a multi-year effort to do this, and it's really incredible. But just coming off of the conversation that Kate and you were just having, food is nourishment also, right? I mean, it is a form of healthcare. Good healthy food is a form of healthcare, and we have to reframe the way that we talk about food. We think about it as like cheap food, get it quickly, whatever you can grab, but really it's a form of healthcare, and therefore also an equity issue, right? Because if you are not able to access good food, you're already at a disadvantage. And so making sure that we're building those connections is critical. And so leading into universal school meals, across the state, kids were not getting free breakfast and lunch across the board. Outside New York City, that was not a thing that most schools had. Some did because they had individual donors and private institutions that would help them get there, but many didn't. Then the pandemic came, and this was actually a federal program that provided free breakfast and lunch during the pandemic to all schools. And we were hopeful that the federal government would continue that program because we saw how critical it was. And unfortunately, they didn't. And so right after the pandemic emergency was deemed over, thousands and thousands and thousands of kids that were getting free breakfast and lunch were now off the program. if they weren't eligible for the CEP program, the federal CEP program, Community Eligibility Program, which basically sets the threshold for if you are, that what we were talking about earlier with Kate, right? If you make enough money, or if you make too much money, you don't qualify. If you make under this arbitrary number that, hasn't been updated in decades, generations, then you don't cut it. And not only does that, not only is that not fair to the students and the families that are right around that line, but there's also a lot of communities, even if they can't afford it, their parents are busy. They may not bring money that day, which means they don't get to eat that day. There's a huge stigma associated too with assistance and with getting something that your peers, especially when you're growing up and you're young kids and you're just trying to figure it out, there's a stigma associated with getting off the bus early to get your breakfast. And the kids don't understand why you get to get off the bus early, or why you get breakfast, or why you're in a different line, or why you have that color lunch ticket. And so what we saw too during the pandemic is that stigma was, and all kids were just equal, and they were able to just be kids. And so they could focus on their social and emotional learning. They could focus on building relationships with each other instead of bullying and teasing each other, or feeling concerned, or maybe not standing up to go get the breakfast and lunch that you were entitled to because you didn't want to be made fun of and then you didn't eat that day. Or if your parents forgot to give you lunch money, or you're right at that threshold, you didn't get to eat that day, which means you don't get to learn as well. You can't focus. You can't teach a hungry kid. And so then a lot of our teachers have stashes of food that they're providing kids if they need it. What we were also hearing is guidance counselors, when kids would get sent to the guidance counselor, to the school resource officer, to the mental health professional, one of the first questions they would ask that student is, did you eat today? Because 9 times out of 10, they were just hungry. And, that is not something that we should be allowing to fester in our schools. And so we, along with my assembly counterpart, Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas from Queens, who is an incredible champion in this fight, with so many other people, this coalition was incredible, and it was a bipartisan effort, really started making a lot of attention and noise to this issue, saying this is something New York should lead. This is something we should step up and do and continue from that pandemic. And so over the last few years, we've been able to get significant investments in the Universal School Meals program. And last year, we were able to cover up to about just over 80% of students across the state, which was a huge win, but 80% did not equal 100. And where was left out actually was a lot of the Hudson Valley and Long Island, because some of the wealth was on paper a bit higher there, but there's still inequality in all of those communities and all the things we've talked about, these kind of arbitrary thresholds. And this year, wonderfully, again, through a lot of advocacy from so many folks, the governor put the expansion, the 100% expansion in her executive budget. And we, of course, kept that through. We kept pushing for it, and we were able to get that through the final budget. So starting in the next school year, every student, regardless of where they live, regardless of their economic status, their background, anything, will have free breakfast and lunch in their schools. One thing I do want to add is part of and kind of what we'll be pushing for next year, and part of what we've been, fighting for, is to update and upgrade the Farm to School program. It's called the 30% Initiative. It's a reimbursement program from the state to have locally sourced, good, fresh, healthy food in our schools. Right now, only lunch qualifies for the Farm to School program. And a lot of our incredible school lunch professionals are trying to make it work, but it's really difficult to do it just on lunch. And quite frankly, no one's buying apples for breakfast and different apples for lunch and different apples for snack. You're buying apples and you're putting them out. So imagine the paperwork burden on our districts too, trying to track the apples for one lunch, what you qualify, what you reimburse. It's impossible. And so we are working to change the Farm to School program to include breakfast and snacks. So all food during the school day will be covered. And talking about the moment we're in right now, one of the reasons we weren't successful to be able to get that change is fear from federal cuts, right? If the federal government changes, one of the things I forgot to mention is we were able to be successful also in advocating last year with the federal government to change their CEP threshold so that more people were also covered by the federal program. And there's been talk now in the new administration to drop that back down.
Yeah.
And we've made sure that we're allocating money that even if they do, we hope they don't, but even if they do, everyone is still going to get free breakfast and lunch. That is a program now that we are doing in the state of New York. But because of that uncertainty, we couldn't allocate additional dollars to change the farm to school program to get fresh, healthy food into more of our schools. So that is a priority for us going into the next budget cycle.
That's great. Yeah, Kate and I have some common friends who are former employees of the USDA who are very proud of that work and who are no longer at USDA and who are very worried as well. Shaun, Councilmember Abreu, you're hearing some of these sort of larger picture pieces on the ground in New York City, right, where we're based. We're obviously in tough times are here, as I was sort of saying in maybe it's fan of Game of Thrones, like the winter is coming. And in your district, like in the district that you're hearing from your people, whether it's on the line who are waiting to get food, what are they most worried about in terms of food and in the coming months? And what's your answer to them, or what are you trying to do? Because I think it's so true. I mean, universal school meals it's less an issue it's not an issue in New York City because we've had it, right, in some ways, but it's a state issue. But what's the conversation you're hearing on the ground in your district?
Yeah, very good question. Look, the lines keep getting longer and longer. At our monthly pantry, the lines keep getting longer. Folks are asking, why can't we provide them with more meals? Why can't we provide them with more meals for home delivered? The home delivered program that WSCAH does, folks are asking for more. And food insecurity is already high, and any cut to food programs, housing support, or benefits access makes the problem worse. There's a real fear among my constituency that the SNAP program could disappear under a Trump administration. So I worry about the families who are already stretched thin, having to make even tougher choices, especially around food. In every crisis, however, we see people organizing, right? Neighborhoods, the neighbors supporting each other, advocates stepping up, community groups filling in the gaps. There's an opportunity right now to rethink how we deliver food and benefits. That's why, for me, one of my biggest, proudest accomplishments is hiring someone funding a program for a WSCAH benefits access coordinator to come into my office every week, right? Because when we fund the benefits access program, it's not only for SNAP, it's for a range of benefits, and it shows WSCAH's commitment and my office's commitment to worry not just about folks' food insecurity, but about their whole person and their whole lives. And so, we know that there's a need, the lines are getting longer, and we need to make sure that in this city budget that there's funding for programs like WSCAH and other organizations doing this amazing, amazing work.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's interesting when I think about these pieces and what we're testing out, like, right, West Side Campaign for 40 years, people showed up from all over the city to come to 86th Street, and our benefits enrollment team that does an incredible job sitting down with person one at a time, but we were, it was only who showed up there. And the moment we started going out to places like your district office, like, let's meet people when you meet people where they are, which is totally for us is based on the summer meals model, right? It was completely like, why would we drag people to congregate feeding sites when we could bring food to kids where they are? Like, the interaction changes. It's back to like, it increases access, it decreases stigma, and it gives the dignity back. And it's funny, and it might seem off topic, but when you start to go to the bigger picture of this work and you get into the sort of climate sphere and the longer term, because yes, am I worried what's happening in 2025 right now? Yes. Do I think we're going to get through it? Most certainly. We have bigger fish to worry, bigger fish to fry in terms of like climate issues. And on the smallest scale, right, having lived in London for a while, when I walk around like I did this weekend, late at night in Hamilton Heights, and there is beautiful bins for all your trash instead of trash everywhere on the street, and there's less cars parked. It's like, okay, you're doing you're testing out things in a small way that could scale. And I think that's important. And at the flip side, we have what's happening, like the Senator Hinchey's talking about with some of the farmers. Like, where do you all see like the bigger picture wins. I want to almost jump past what we're dealing with right now. And when we think about climate change, I know, Kate, you've gone to giving talks all over the world on some of this work. Like, where are you seeing
Well,
the wins?
yeah, I mean, I think that there's some interesting opportunities, and like different kinds of challenges for us. And when I say that, I was chatting with a friend of WSCAH and also of the neighborhood, Bill Telepan, last Thursday. We were having dinner, and we know what's not working right now at the federal level is um, is a language that so many of us have mastered, which is talking about the need and the impact on low income families and all the dynamic that comes around like the people. um the rationale for talking about people just isn't working, right? And like it pains us to no end, the fact that like sort of the plan is to hurt people. But what I think we all are not experienced enough in is thinking about how, like, what is the flip of that? So Bill and I had this idea, thinking about, thinking, keeping it in the school meals space of, if you want to serve even better meals, which we all do because we should always be improving and trying to get better. What if we have something like the Great American Oven Company, right? And we have a handshake deal with the president and the Great American Oven Company that all schools across the country are going to get big American ovens, right? That's a different way of talking about the solution that is not about people, right? Or thinking about like, it's not about, and I don't have the answer here, right? But it's not about like the fix to snap cuts isn't for low income New Yorkers and Americans. Yes, it's about more money, but like, what's the business angle converse to talking about the impact on low income people? So I think that there's an interesting like part of our brain that has to turn on to be able to think about what is the business deal, right? That like we're all here either because we certainly all love serving people and constituents and making lives better, and we aren't all versed in like a business frame of mind. And I think that's an opportunity for us to think about how do we position some of the outcomes that we want to see from different places. So I don't know. It was just like the American oven thing was like
It's
a
funny
one.
because 10, was it
Go ahead.
10 years ago, 10 years ago, like I helped coordinate nationally as chefs move to school. And that was, let's bring chefs into schools all over the country and engage with kids, and that will transform food.
Yeah.
And we'll send some little kits from KitchenAid to each place, and that'll do it. And there was no business solution. There was no dollars related to it. And it didn't activate. I mean, it was fun and it was nice, and I'm not knocking it down, but it didn't have what you're saying. It wasn't like bringing industry in all these different ways.
Or like I love that the senator brought up, and there's so many different ways we could have this conversation, but certainly the food and medicine connection, the food and healthcare is like an opportunity here that could go south, or it's like, where is there the business opportunity to do the home delivered meals with a medically tailored meal? Certainly some of those companies exist now, but is there a business deal that we can close to be able to get that to come to life across the country, right? Like it's a different way of thinking about it, certainly. But and clearly, I think in the climate space, the non four letter word here of like how are we able to think about the big wins? And thank goodness the solar farm plan is happening, continues to thrive now in the city and certainly out on Long Island. But like how do we are able to talk a little bit more of their language to see some progress over the next several years is something that I want to challenge certainly myself to help to think about in different ways. But like I just really want to lift up certainly what Councilmember mentioned here, which is the reality is that people are seriously afraid. And like we can't all live in a state of fear. And you are exactly right, Greg. We will get through all of this. But like, these are hard moments, not, of course, for everyone that is, looking at headlines and experiencing the very real dynamic of people and populations that are being threatened. But also, as those, I have to think about my colleagues too, who are in the process of having to make hard decisions around budgets, and will have to continue to do that. It's not easy. But I think, with forums like this, and certainly recognizing that we're in a place to get through and then come out the other side, we will come out the other side, and we will take care of our neighbors and our fellow New Yorkers, to make sure that we are nourishing them and setting them up for, the best success that can happen in these hard times.
Yeah.
And Greg, if I may, I'd love to jump in because I think there's some really good state wins too that, dovetail in this space. I think, I love the Great American Oven Company. The state of New York has a grants program also for farm to school and school kitchen upgrades. And so we're trying to make it easier for schools across the state to be able to do some of this local food work as well. But even outside of the school system and the school meals program, I'll never forget where I was during the pandemic. We're all watching the previous governor do the 11 o'clock briefings. And again, I live in a rural community, and it wasn't until day 55 that the food conversation was even really addressed. It was day 55 that it was acknowledged that farmers were dumping milk and food was dying on the vine. And we knew that was happening for weeks, right? And people in the communities were lining up at food banks, and people were screaming from the rooftops that there wasn't enough food. It's day 55. We kind of had this light bulb moment at the state level. And so again, amongst a lot of chaos, but it was day 55. And one of the silver linings from that pandemic was the Nourish New York program. And one of the things we did in my first term was codify that program. And what the Nourish New York program is it buys food from farmers. And it used to be just the excess food. That's where it started. But now it's just a new market. And it gives that food to food banks and food pantries across the state. And we've been increasing the amount of money that goes to both that program and HIPNAP over the last few years. This year, I believe we're at $75 million in the budget for the Nourish New York program, or $55 million if we want 75. But we've been increasing those dollars substantially. And that's a great program that has really expanded, as you know, access to good food. One of the things we did also was write legislation to actually set state purchasing thresholds for New York state agencies, any agency that buys food, whether that's docks, corrections, whether that's DOH, our healthcare sector, our school sector, mental health, you name it. We should be buying percentages of our locally sourced healthy food. One, it's better from the climate perspective because you're not trucking it in or flying it in. It's also keeping our tax dollars circular in our economy, and our food is really good. So it's getting good, fresh, healthy, again, nutritious food to people who use all those state services. And that's a game changer, something we hadn't had before. And the governor actually did pretty much our bill by executive order. And we want to codify that now. It actually just passed this week through the Senate again, because that should be not at the whim of the executive chamber, but something that we just commit to as a state. And another thing we're working on too is the Good Food Program, because we want to make sure that we can, spend a little bit of extra money by leading with our values. If farms are doing good environmental practices, they have good labor practices, they're supporting the local economy. We want to be buying food from those farms and those farm businesses to give to people and to use in different, for our municipalities to be able to do. And on the environmental side, I'll just close, we passed the Climate Resiliency and Soil Health Act, which was the first time that we updated the state's soil health laws since the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. Like, think about that for a moment, right? Talking about, and a lot of our farms were doing this here because it's good practice, but making sure that we're helping incentivize and really direct our ag communities to do things like cover cropping and rotational grazing and taking care of the soil and thinking about that, doing dual plants at different seasons to be able to make sure that we're capturing more carbon and being thoughtful about that. And so we've had some really big strides. And I think one of the advantages, or one of the things we have to look for in this moment that we're seeing with the federal government, is how to be more self-reliant. We have the food, we have the land, we have the farmers, we have the need. So let's make sure that we can connect these dots. Again, the upstate, downstate, but even in rural communities, there's a lot of food need. There's a lot of food insecurity. How do we connect these dots and get more insular and set up the food systems in our state that are resilient, both in terms of climate policy as well as kind of economic policy and, resilient from external forces, to make sure that we're getting people the food that they need.
For sure. It's interesting, Kate, you mentioned that only like 4 years ago or so, the city EFAP, now CFC program, didn't even have fresh produce. And I think we'll be looking back with, hopefully with you, Senator Hinchey, and others at HIPNEP and Nourish in the coming year to say, look, if we want to increase access to these products, it's going to be through transforming how the process also works so that more direct service groups can have direct access to it in a faster way. Now, will it be easy for the bureaucracy? Maybe not, but I'm more concerned about making sure access is easy for the customer, the end user, as opposed to the major departments in Albany and everything. But when I look at all this stuff, and I'm like, sometimes I think food is easy in some ways. But I know that when we serve someone a pantry bag, that person has a bunch more going on in their lives that is at stake. And, one of the biggies right now, we're definitely seeing a lot of this, and I think Councilmember Abreu knows a lot more than I do on it. Like when it comes to housing and how this is going to affect, people's ability to purchase healthy food, people's ability to stay in their home, all these pieces, what do we see happening right now, Shaun, in this world?
Yeah, we have 1.2 million households in New York City that are rent burdened. That's 55% of New York City households, which means 1.2 million families are dedicating at least more than 30% of their income towards rent. And that's reducing their ability to also access affordable, nutritious, healthy food options. And our vacancy rate right now in New York City is at 1.4%. That's why, the council and the mayor's office, partner to deliver the city of yes to make sure that every neighborhood in this city are doing their fair share in constructing affordable housing. We know that the demand for housing is very, very high and the supply is very, very low. And that's really constraining the housing market. And we do know that when we make homes more affordable for folks, they'll be able to then afford food options that are healthier for them and that are also culturally relevant. So that's a very big priority for us in the city council. We have housing projects in our districts that we're pushing forward, but we need to make sure that we spread that attitude of that culture of wanting to build citywide, because it is directly related. When you have more resources in your pocket, you're going to be able to then buy the food that you need. That being said, Greg, we often talk about this before. I think in my first year in office, you often spoke about purchasing power and WSCAH's purchasing power. It's only greater when you can partner with other organizations that buy in bulk so that you can reduce the price of food to increase its availability for the neighborhoods that we need it. And so I would like to see more of that movement, whether it be at the city level or the state level, having a dominant purchasing power to buy in bulk and reduce cost, I think is going to be a big, big win. I would also like to say that I think there's an opportunity here for the city council and the mayor's office to really think critically about the excess food and food waste that we're seeing throughout our city. It's incredible. I'm the chair of the sanitation committee in the city council, and one thing I know is that our composting levels are not where they should be, but I tell you that in composting, we do know there's a lot of food that could have been used by others. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to work with our business community, work with our elected officials to identify ways, because a lot of businesses just throw out food. And I think that's something that we can try to address. Also, I'll conclude by saying last year, when there was millions of dollars on the table that were going to be lost for the food pantries, I was proud to step in, and it took that partnership, this coalition with, with WSCAH and all these other organizations. And should we need to fight again this year, we're going to do it. You can count on my support.
Thank you. I mean, I know we across the network, we were made a big bold ask of $100 million, and the initial budget was at 31 million. So yeah, that's a massive gap when we think about the need, knowing what's to come, for sure. So we thank the council in advance for all their support.
Just
but-
clarifying, Greg, it's 31 on top of the existing baseline, so that takes it to about 50 and
Okay.
change. So
Well-
it's still getting up there, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, you got right. Thank you for that. So we're almost at the same number as last year. Would that be correct? Yes. This is always the confusion for me and others of like, what's the actual number? But we'll still, the push is for 100. So Shaun, we still got you there.
All right, we'll keep pushing.
But as we wrap up, and I would love, as I always say, like, there's like no silver bullet in any of this, right? It's not, oh, people are like, oh, should I just fund West Side Campaign Against Hunger? I'm like, no. Like, you should fund anti-hunger work. You're going to need to fund climate resiliency. You're going to fund after-school programs. Everyone has to like do their part in multiple ways, because that's what everyone on this call does, right? Like, no one is focused on one singular issue, and everything's intertwined. So maybe if you all can each just leave us with, one thing that you're excited to work on in the year ahead that maybe people should be thinking about, who are listening in, that, they should be supporting in a new way that they hadn't thought of before.
So I had the opportunity to join the Grow NYC board meeting earlier this week, and just connecting something here. Obviously the senator, as chair of the Ag Committee here, it's what we learned is the people, as we just opened our farmers market season this week, and they're so essential to so many New Yorkers. The population that actually shops at farmers market skews really older. Like, a lot of older New Yorkers find themselves shopping at farmers markets, which is great. And something that often gets missed as we're talking about the devastation of SNAP cuts that are we're looking down the tunnel here at, is the impact, is how many farmers markets truly rely on federal nutrition program benefits, including SNAP. And so my ask is actually to get all of us to invite our friends, our kids, our neighbors to utilize farmers markets a lot more, because we need this sort of new wave of a younger generation to really begin to go to farmers markets more, because again, the redemption rate, particularly for SNAP and other benefits, is high, which is great. But we've got to make sure that those farmers markets continue to thrive in light of, again, the threat of cuts coming down the pike here. And so I just, I never would have, thought about that before getting that information. But I think that those are lifelines, again, for fresh produce in a lot of communities that don't have grocery stores that stock their shelves in the way that maybe other neighborhoods do. But let's get a diversity of ages utilizing our farmers markets. And if we can look back at the end at our Thanksgiving market and say, what a change we've seen in our markets, that would be a really cool thing.
At a local level, I'll say at a very, very briefly, I'm looking forward to the expansion of WSCAH's community hubs. And if there's anything we can do, from a staffing standpoint, from, helping recruit volunteers, everything is local here for us, and we know the need is great. And so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Thank you, Shaun.
And I'll say a couple of quick things. Farm to school, as I talked about earlier, that we have to get that done. That would be a game changer for everybody, for our ag community, for our kids, for our future, right? It's an investment in our future. That's a big one. We have an ag education bill, which I actually think is really important, because we have so many jobs in agriculture, high-tech jobs, to outdoor jobs that we want folks to understand and to come into. And we also want people to understand where their food comes from, right? Being able to understand where your food comes from, know how to cook it, know how it grows, know what it tastes like when it's fresh, that encourages also healthy behaviors. And we've seen in a number of programs in New York City where kids are able to actually have a community garden and they're able to grow food. They go home to their parents and say, we want to cook this, we want to eat this, like, let's do this together, which is a really beautiful thing. And so making sure, as an example of one of those connections between upstate and downstate, having all of our schools, including and really especially those in our cities, have that kind of education as an option for students, I think is really important and would be really fun. And we're working on that. And on a broader picture, again, connecting those upstate downstate connections. And so figuring out how we can have better pipelines, better ecosystems. I know there's a huge cold storage expansion happening, which is incredibly exciting. What more can we do? What investments do we need to focus on so that we can get our food to the communities that need it and make it as easy and as seamless as possible?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, thank you, Senator Hinchey and Executive Kate MacKenzie from the Mayor's Office of Food Policy and Councilmember Abreu for joining us. You know, if anything, what WSCA's focused on always is collaboration and bringing amazing groups together and increasing access. And what I think we did today was increase access to an amazing network of knowledge and ideas from all three of you. So we look forward to continuing the conversation with you all. And if any of you are in New York City on June 1st, we'll be having our WSCAH Rocks the Block, which is our massive, in a sense, block party that really is 1,000 people volunteering to pack food in the middle of the street on what will be a beautiful sunny day in New York. We can guarantee it. It always is. And so we'll leave you with that. If you want to join us on June 1st, we thank everyone for joining us who tuned in. We'll send this out to everyone. And again, thank you to the Senator, the council member, and Kate from the Mayor's Office of Food Policy. You all are doing amazing work, and we'll let you get back to what I'm sure is the rest of your busy day. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.